Have you ever tossed and turned late at night when the room sinks into silence, yet your mind screams in chaos? You paint the worst-case scenarios for yourself, blame yourself for an offhand remark, or feel anxious about a future that has never happened. What is the truth? You are not fighting the world out there. You are being tormented by the very toxic thoughts forged by your own mind. Yet, Stoic philosophy from thousands of years ago left behind a staggering truth. You cannot forbid the storms from coming, but you have the right to refuse to let them knock you down. In this video, we will pull back the veil of chaos to discover 8 ultimate Stoic rules, the key to reshaping the flow of your thoughts, helping you break the grip of negativity. Stop continuing to be a victim of invisible fears. Prepare your mind, because right after this, the way you perceive this life will change permanently. Watch right to the end to seize the power of mastering yourself. 1. Separating events and stories, truth versus assumption. The verdict entitled Self-Projection and the Power of Stoic Truth. Have you ever experienced the feeling of a racing heart and a tight chest, triggered solely by a brief silence from the outside world? A message sent long ago, greeted only by endless silence. A fleeting glance from a colleague suddenly transformed into scorn within your mind. At that exact moment, a script-generating machine inside your head begins to operate at breakneck speed. You tell yourself, "They are sick of me. Did I say something wrong?" Or, "They no longer respect me." From a mere neutral event, as small as a speck of dust, your mind has meticulously crafted a monumental mental catastrophe, leaving you to embrace the ultimate agony born from that very disaster. That is the most sophisticated trap the human brain sets for itself. Ancient Stoic philosophy saw through this paradox ages ago. Great sages like Marcus Aurelius reminded us of a core truth. Things and events are inherently neutral. It is our emotional lens of interpretation and judgment that drapes them in garments of suffering. An event is just an event, but the story you weave around it possesses the power to destroy inner peace. We are not wounded by what happens out there, but tormented by the toxic projections originating from within. So, what is the escape from long, sleepless nights spent imagining pain? The answer from Stoicism is razor-sharp, yet deeply healing. Stop and weigh 2 entirely distinct concepts, truth and assumption. When the storm of negative thoughts strikes, instead of surrendering to emotions that drag you down into the abyss of insecurity, bravely throw a bucket of cold water onto your mind with 2 sacred questions. What do I truly know for certain, and what is merely a product of my own projection? Clearly separate the boundaries of objective reality from the illusions born of imagination. You know for a fact that they haven't replied to your message. That is the truth. But the notion that they disrespect you, that is entirely an unfounded conjecture, a trap generated by your own insecurity. When you bravely draw that line, magic begins to happen. The 1,000-pound weight of fear suddenly dissolves like morning mist. You realize that the actual situation has never been as terrible and terrifying as the tragic film your mind has just screened. Mastering your life does not mean turning into a cold, emotionless machine before every fluctuation. Mastery means understanding your supreme personal power, the refusal to turn assumptions into reality. When you learn to look straight into reality with a cold head and a tranquil heart, no drifting words, no baseless silence can ever touch the deep peace within you again. That is the most glorious victory of a soul possessing Stoic fortitude. 2. Returning to what is within our control, the art of letting go and the power of the circle of control. Have you ever sat before an interview room door, your hands freezing, your chest feeling as though it were being squeezed by invisible hands because of looping questions? Will the employer like my resume? Are competing applicants more brilliant? Or how will they evaluate me? Or sometimes you torment yourself to exhaustion over a past mistake, wishing time could turn back to fix a careless remark. We often have the strange habit of pouring all our energy, dedication, and soul's peace into carrying burdens that do not belong to us. We rush into battles against storms beyond our reach, only to reap profound helplessness, exhaustion, and deep injury. That is the greatest tragedy of modern humanity, wasting the most precious energy of our lives on things entirely outside our control. Stoic philosophy from thousands of years ago drew a boundary as clear as morning light to rescue our minds. Epictetus once asserted an immortal truth that the first and most crucial task in everyone's life is to draw a sharp distinction, what belongs to us and what lies outside us. The past is a realm of ashes that cannot be raked back up. The future is an uncertain variable that cannot be predicted. The reactions, attitudes, and opinions of others are even more of an inviolable territory over which you never hold the right to judge or alter. You cannot force others to love you, you cannot make the flow of time stand still, and you cannot firmly grasp an unformed outcome. So why must we writhe and pay such an expensive emotional price for things we cannot turn around? Every single drop of anxious tear, every long sleepless night spent pondering the judgments of others, is precisely when you are throwing money out the window with your own hands, cutting away pieces of your inner peace to buy a ticket into a hopeless game. The sole exit, and simultaneously the golden key of the Stoics, lies in narrowing that entire grand world down into a single circle, your own control. You cannot decide whom the employer will choose, but you possess absolute authority over the way you step into that room. Meticulous preparation is yours. An attitude of holding your head high is yours. Giving your utmost effort until the final minute is yours. And the way you react to any outcome, whether victory or defeat, entirely belongs to your supreme power. When adversity strikes, when everything veers off the expected trajectory, stop scratching at the walls of fate immediately. Ask yourself a deeply conscious question: is there anything I can truly do right now? If the answer is yes, pour your whole heart into action without minding the outcome. If the answer is no, bravely let go. Stopping the waste of emotions on things beyond reach is not cowardice or surrender to fate. It is the highest manifestation of iron discipline and soulful wisdom. When you understand that your peace is too precious to squander on impermanent external circumstances, you will naturally walk with a proud posture. The world out there may rage with tempests, but within your chest stands a sturdy lighthouse that nothing can shake. That is the true freedom that only Stoicism can bestow upon you. 3. Ceasing to suffer over illusory futures. The burden of gilded cages of illusion and the art of living in the present. Have you ever immersed yourself in the still space of the night, when all life's sounds have faded, leaving only your own sigh echoing in the empty room? At that very vulnerable moment, a silent machine inside your mind quietly starts up. Without a single real event happening, without a single loud noise ringing out, our brain begins to weave horror films named the future. You imagine yourself stumbling in an upcoming project, self-scripting the bitter dialogue of a breakup that has never happened, or trembling before the prospect of being left behind amid the churning currents of life. You writhe in fear, your chest tightens, sweat breaks out, and you fully experience every agony and grievance of a bitter failure. Yet, what is the cruel yet wondrous truth? All of those things have completely never happened. They are merely ghosts, created by your overactive imagination. That is the tragedy named suffering over an illusory future. Modern human beings seem to be the most brilliant screenwriters for our own disasters. We waste abundant life energy drop our present smiles, and strangle joy in every breath, just to carry unformed pains. As the philosopher Seneca warned with a wake-up call, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. We voluntarily turn our souls into gilded cages, imprisoning ourselves with thousands of questions, beginning with the two words, what if? What if I fail? What if they leave? What if tomorrow collapses? Those invisible anxieties gnaw at our core, leaving us exhausted right before the starting line of actual life truly opens. So, how to escape this toxic mental trap? Stoicism opens a brilliantly bright path, completely transforming how we face tomorrow's unknowns through a small shift in words that carries resurrection power for the soul, changing the way we ask questions. Instead of letting yourself sink into the fearful and helpless question, what if this terrible thing happens? Which only breeds paralyzing anxiety, Stoic sages teach us to bravely transform it into an active stance. If that truly happens, what will I do to face it? Feel the immense difference between those two poles. One side is passivity, trembling to accept being a victim of fate, waiting for storms to knock you down. The other side is the sharp preparation of a warrior, one who dares to look difficulty straight in the eye, outline plans, hone fortitude, and tell themselves that even if the sky falls, they still have enough strength to stand firmly on their own 2 feet. That is the fragile yet grand boundary between overthinking that paralyzes action and strategic preparation that delivers inner power. Stoic masters never deny the future. They prepare for it, but never allow the future to strip away their present moment. Seneca and Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded us that we have 2 lives, and the second life begins when we realize we only have one. You cannot live tomorrow tonight. You cannot solve next year's chasms with today's tears. Therefore, when the darkness of future scenarios draws in to besiege your mind, stop. Take a deep breath. Place your hand on your left chest and whisper to yourself, if the problem truly arrives, I will solve it with the fortitude of that day. But for now, I live fully, only for today. Let go of unarrived burdens, because your peace is too precious to pawn for a future that has never existed. When you learn how to anchor your mind in reality, cherishing every second in the present, you will realize that no illusory storm can ever steal the steadfastness in your soul. That is the absolute freedom of a mind restructured in the spirit of Stoicism. 4. Do not turn a bad day into a bad identity. The mistake of labeling and the regenerative power of a Stoic. Have you ever experienced a day when everything seemed to turn its back on you? A project plan rejected at the 11th hour, a disastrously failed interview, or a bitter remark from someone you trusted most. In those lonely moments, as your heavy footsteps returned to a dark room, a quiet voice whispered in your mind, I am so useless, I was born to fail, or no one needs someone as incompetent as me. Just because of a single incident, a temporary stumble in the flow of life, we hastily grab the most toxic label to paste onto our very souls. We automatically equate ourselves with pain, viewing the collapse of a circumstance as the collapse of our entire human worth. That is the most dangerous psychological trap that human beings set for themselves, turning a bad day into a bad identity. Stoic philosophy from thousands of years ago saw through this lethal word trap. Great sages like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus always drew a clear line between actions and essence. A stumble, a mistake, a rejection, these are merely external events, random pieces happening on the journey of human experience. They belong to the category of what has happened, and they completely fail to define who you are. Failing at a job does not mean you are a failure. Losing control once does not mean you are a weak person. Yet, Modern humans have the habit of being most cruel to themselves, binding themselves with their own hands into the shackles of negative identities. Every time you tell yourself, "I am useless," you are extinguishing the flame of hope with your own hands, stripping away your own power to repair yourself and stand back up. What is the escape from the heart wounds caused by such false self-labeling? Stoic philosophy hands you a magical key called cognitive transformation. Instead of writhing in the quagmire of self-pity and the helpless question, "Why is this happening to me?" a Stoic practitioner faces adversity boldly with a question carrying the stature of elevation. What qualities is this bitter situation demanding me to develop? Feel the wondrous shift in energy when you ask that question. The initial shock is no longer a death sentence for your self-confidence, but turns into a refined metallurgical furnace. Injustice transforms into a lesson in patience. Loneliness transforms into an opportunity to forge self-mastery. A deep wound suddenly turns into material for you to hone compassion and courage. You are no longer a pitiful victim, trembling at the foot of the mountain of adversity. You have stepped up, squared your shoulders, and become an exceptional student of the school of life. The scars on your mental body do not weaken you. They become a glorious testament to how resiliently you have weathered the storm. Therefore, the next time you stumble, do not rush to grab bad labels to loop around your neck. Remember, no matter how torrential the rain outside may be, it can never fade the steadfast nature of a mountain. Let a bad day pass like an incident, but keep within your soul the sturdy character of a master of destiny. That is the ultimate victory of a mind restructured by Stoic philosophy. 5. Ceasing to argue with reality. Acceptance, the invisible wall, named resentment, and the key of Stoic acceptance. Have you ever fallen into a state of screaming hopelessly at the very adversity of life? A door of opportunity suddenly slamming shut, someone you deeply trusted and loved leaving your world, or a plan that consumed so much sweat and tears collapsing overnight. In those bitter moments, our minds often frantically resist reality with an indignant question, "Why is this happening to me? Things shouldn't be like this." We embrace resentment, pouring all our energy into scratching at the walls of the accomplished fact, persistently demanding to alter an unchangeable past, or forcing life to follow the trajectory of our own desires. Yet, life and objective reality have never been an obedient child that you can easily mold to personal preferences. Your screaming, blaming, or self-torment cannot make the flow of time run backward, nor can it salvage an exhausted relationship. You are stabbing your own bleeding hands into the sharp thorns of stubbornness, thinking that hating adversity will change the landscape. But in truth, you are only reaping exhaustion and endless, numbing pain. That is the most dangerous psychological trap, arguing with reality. Stoic philosophy from thousands of years ago, early on, rang the alarm bell to awaken humanity through the sharp teachings of sages like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. They understood that reality is like a turbulent rushing river. You cannot stop the violent current by standing on the bank and cursing it. Blind resistance only causes you to drown in your own toxic thoughts. So, where does true liberation lie? The ultimate secret of Stoic philosophy is not surrendering to fate, but lies in a concept often misunderstood: acceptance. Acceptance never means that you must applaud a calamity or nod and smile at the pain that life inflicts. Acceptance is the courageous wakefulness to look truth straight in the eye and whisper to yourself, "This is precisely my current starting point." No matter how harsh, no matter how humiliating it is. That is the moment you stop fighting what is already a done deal, to recall all the energy dispersed by resentment back to the present. When you stop asking the helpless question, "Why?" That is also when the door of true wisdom genuinely opens. A person with stoic fortitude will not waste even a single second regretting the past or complaining about adversity. Instead, they will raise the most grandly constructive question: given the reality in front of me, what is the wisest thing I can do next? That very question is the turning point that changes the entire landscape. The victim of resentment instantly transforms into a warrior building their life. You are no longer pushed around by the fierce storms of circumstance, but become the steadfast helmsman of your own ship of life. Even if rough seas cover the ocean surface, you still find the most correct direction to rise. That is absolute freedom, and also the most glorious victory of the mind. When you stop arguing with reality, the world, no matter how uncertain, can never steal the deep peace within your soul. 6. Guarding the mind like guarding life. The inner citadel and the art of purifying a chaotic world. Have you ever wondered why, even though you did nothing wrong and got entangled in no major event, your mind remains constantly shaken, fatigued, and exhausted? The answer lies right in the phone in your palm, in flashing notifications, in sensational news full of outrage, and in endless arguments across cyberspace. We are living amid an information overload world where millions of streams of thought, prejudice, insecurity, and fear are pumped directly into our heads every day. You open your heart to receive everything, only to inadvertently turn your soul into a gigantic dumping ground filled with meaningless background noise from others. You cannot spend hours immersed in the chaos, bitterness, and fear of the outside world and then expect to possess a still, peaceful inner self. That is an illusion that never comes true. Stoic philosophy from thousands of years ago saw through this hazard with an eerily sharp vision. Great sages like Seneca or Marcus Aurelius compared the human mind to a fortified citadel. If you throw open every gate and lower the portcullis to let any stranger bring garbage and chaos inside, that citadel will sooner or later collapse. They understood that peace does not naturally arise from the surrounding environment. It must be protected by a steel-barricaded discipline named selectivity. Guarding the mind is not a luxury choice, but a matter of survival for the purity of the soul. How short your life is, how precious your energy is. Why squander it on the empty arguments of strangers? Why allow negative opinions and harsh criticisms from an anonymous crowd the right to dictate your emotions throughout a long day? The only escape to reclaim self-mastery is to execute a revolution of purification, becoming extremely rigorous about what you allow to enter your inner world. Start setting strict filters for every stream of information, every relationship, and every space you step into. Before every book, every news article, every conversation, or every social media post, ask yourself a core-defining question: does this truly make me wiser, stronger, or calmer? If the answer is no, if it only incites outrage, nurtures jealousy, or sows more insecurity in your heart, turn your back decisively. That is not indifference or selfishness toward the world, but the supreme act of compassion for oneself. Sometimes, protecting peace does not lie in trying to build a new good habit, but in daring to bravely cut away unnecessary noise. You have no obligation to respond to every judgment, no need to participate in every win-lose debate, and certainly no need to open the doors of your soul to everyone who wishes to step in and stain your purity. When you learn how to slam the door on the chaos outside, you will discover a space of unprecedented stillness and strength inside your chest. No matter how much the outer world rages with tempests, spins into madness, and fills with shouts, deep within you remains a steadfast, inviolable citadel. That is absolute freedom and the most glorious reward for a soul that knows how to protect itself in the Stoic spirit. 7. Cultivating the distance between thought and action, the sacred pause and the supreme power of the mind. Have you ever acted on a sudden burst of anger, only for regret to choke your core a few seconds later when everything had passed? A sharp word uttered in a moment of lost composure, a hasty decision made in a panic, or a toxic belief reinforced the moment a shred of suspicion sprouted. We often have the habit of surrendering our lives to the automation of instinct. The moment a negative thought flickers in our head, we instantly let it guide our bodies, turning transient emotions into irreversible actions. We live like machines, pre-programmed by fear, anger, and insecurity, only to destroy with our own hands the relationships and peace we painstakingly cultivated. That is the greatest trap, imprisoning human reason, letting negative thoughts automatically translate into actions and blind beliefs. Stoic philosophy from thousands of years ago saw through this psychological mechanism and handed humanity its sharpest weapon, which is the pause. Great sages like Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus constantly reminded us of an immutable truth. You can never stop the first thought from appearing in your mind. You are human, and your mind will sometimes naturally generate fears, doubts, or rage as a biological reflex. That is entirely normal and unavoidable. Yet, disaster only occurs when you grant that first thought absolute power to direct your behavior. A person of fortitude is not one who never feels fear or never harbors negative thoughts. Rather, it is one who knows how to stand still within the fragile boundary between stimulus and response. That sacred pause is precisely where true freedom reigns, when a toxic thought, an intense fury, or an insecurity strikes. Instead of instantly reacting by instinct, bravely take a deep breath and slow down for a beat. In that brief moment of stillness, you relinquish the rule of instinct and hand the crown back to reason. You realize that the first thought belongs to circumstance, to instinct, but the second thought, the subsequent attitude, and the decisive action belong entirely to your own supreme power of choice. You have the right to watch surging anger as a guest passing by your house. Observe it, understand it, but resolutely refuse to open the door and invite it in to master your soul's home. You have the right to see through fear, but refuse to submit or make decisions driven by that fear. This wondrous transformation elevates you from a passive victim of emotions into the architect of your own destiny. The world out there may continuously hurl surprises, challenges, or provocations at you, but no one, no circumstance can force you to act unless you voluntarily permit it to happen. When you cultivate the habit of creating a pause between mind and action, the raging, stormy world outside suddenly becomes harmless. You find absolute stillness right in the eye of the storm, holding the key to self-mastery. That is the most glorious victory, the clearest testament to an inner self tempered and steadied in the Stoic spirit. 8. The victory of a Stoic, the triumphant song of the soul and Stoic fortitude. Have you ever wondered what the ultimate destination of self-cultivation, of reading philosophy, of long nights of self-reflection and striving to overcome adversity truly is? Do we long for an absolute flat, calm life where storms no longer exist, heart-wrenching pains are gone, and every path is paved with velvet roses? The truth is, if you are still searching for such an easy world, you will forever reap only bitter disappointment. Life has never promised to be gentle with anyone. Challenges, injustices, losses, and painful falls will still continue to unfold according to their natural laws. And that is precisely when the ultimate truth of Stoic philosophy shines brightly like a lighthouse guiding humanity. The ultimate goal of awakening is not to make life easier, but to make yourself stronger. The most glorious victory of a Stoic practitioner does not lie in escaping the storm, or in the outside world suddenly becoming gentle and pleasant. That victory lies deep within their steadfast inner self. It is the state of proud stillness. When you face adversity, you still see fear rearing its claws. You still clearly feel anxieties tearing at your chest. You know the harshness of reality, yet absolutely, you refuse to let them subdue you. Becoming strong does not mean turning your heart into an emotionless block of stone, or forcing yourself into a steel machine that feels no pain. The true strength of a Stoic lies in the supreme power of freedom, maintaining the right to choose how you behave amidst the raging storm. When anger knocks on the door, you recognize it, but do not open the door for it to ravage the house of your soul. When fear waits to devour reason, you observe it as an uninvited guest, but resolutely keep a firm grip on the steering wheel of your life. No one can ever rob you of that absolute freedom. Circumstances may strip away your wealth, fame, or even your health, but they are utterly powerless before the unwavering will of a mind tempered through the red fire of Stoic philosophy. When you reach that state of inner self, every fluctuation of the outer world suddenly becomes meaningless. You no longer pray for life to become less harsh, but only silently pray for yourself to have enough fortitude to welcome every challenge. You smile at adversity, not because it does not hurt, but because you know that every passing wound helps you forge another layer of depth, a greater resilience. That is the triumphant song of a free soul. No matter how uncertain, impermanent, and full of bitter surprises life may be, you, with a steadfast inner self, an iron will, and a wakeful heart, still stand proudly there, completely mastering your own destiny. Concluding the journey of peering into the mind through the lens of Stoicism, we realize a stirring truth. The greatest tragedy in human life is not having to face adversity, but voluntarily bowing one's head to play the role of a helpless victim before circumstances. You cannot stop the storms out there from knocking down trees. You cannot force the flow of life to stop its twists and turns, and even less can you control what others do to you. Yet, supreme power remains entirely within your chest. That is the right to choose how to interpret events and decide your own reaction. When you stop complaining, take back the burden of judgment to firmly hold the pen of destiny, you will step out of the darkness of passivity to become the greatest screenwriter of your own life. The world may write chapters full of challenges, but how the final page turns out is entirely up to you to decide.